first principal was at Bates School was a Mr. Schleter, and in the book that they gave us, his name was listed as Morrow, Mr. Morrow. This was his first year there too, so I was calling him Mr. Morrow. But Mr. Schleter had his daughter Wilma went to Harris, but her mother was found murdered, and he was under some suspicion at the time. There were footprints in the snow leading to the bedroom of the woman, Mrs. Schleter, and I guess the police concluded that he was innocent because there was never any action taken. But his second wife looked a lot like his daughter, so he must have liked a particular type of woman. And he was a sharp man. He had a kind of and he had a wart on the end of his nose, and had a very pleasant smile, very big grin, and he had a pleasant expression on his face. But I would tell my mother these stories about his first wife having met this foul play, and about his second wife being so nice looking. And my mother pictured him as some romantic figure, like a movie star. And when she met him one day, she could hardly keep from laughing aloud, because he was anything. He was about 5'7", and round face, and this nothing romantic about his looks at all. I guess whatever attracted him to the women was his personality. And he took a great liking to Alma Schramm at our school, and to several other teachers, but especially Alma. And when he was transferred to Melanphy, he talked her into going with him over there, and several other, the upper grade teachers. But Alma, strangely enough, bore a strong resemblance to the second Mrs. Schleter, and to his daughter of the first Mrs. Schleter. So we all thought that was strange, that he was attracted to the women of always the same type. And but I wanted to talk a little bit about, my mother was born on Cottage Avenue near St. Teresa's Church, and then when her family got larger, my grandmother, I don't know if she built that house on Evans, 3832 Evans, or whether they bought a house that was already there. I think they built it. The rooms were enormous, beautiful, big rooms, and the fireplace in each dining room, fireplace in the living room. I used to love to sit on that rug. They had a rug with little kittens on it, a real cute rug, a throw rug in front of the dining room fireplace. And by the time I was born, her oldest brother John had died. Her sister Anne, who was a beauty, had died. And Uncle Willie had died, William. And so up living at the house were Jimmy and Mamie and Harry. And I was up there all the time, up at Aunt Mamie's or Uncle Jimmy's or Harry's, I don't know which I called it. And it was was my second home, and my brother was up there a lot too, because we lived 3860 Evans, and but we had many a good time up at the Jenkins household. And they had another sister who died, Florence. She died of pneumonia when she was 10 months old. And so my mother who was really the second oldest, they considered her the baby, and she was the pet. And then she was the only one who had children, and so we were idolized by our aunts and uncles. And on Christmas Day, we couldn't open our presents till they came down to watch our joy at beholding the gifts. And they arrived bright and early so we wouldn't be kept waiting. And then, so in my mother's family there were John, who was a reporter for the paper, and my mother's favorite. He must have been lovely, so refined. And Anne, who was a wonderful person. And then Harry and Jimmy, and we were very fond of them. They were both plumbers, although Jimmy could have been an electrician too. He was so talented in that. And then, but then Harry used to show his bank books to people, and he owned a house. Thank heavens he did buy a flat, because all that money was wiped out when Roosevelt closed the banks. The West St. Louis Trust Company never opened up again, and all their life savings were gone forever. And it was terribly hard on them. A lot of people at that time committed suicide. Thank God they had their religion to keep them from doing that if they would have felt like it. And my father had, he was the oldest. And then there was a brother who ate paint, and he died. And then there was Nellie, and then George, and then Callie. Callie was the baby. Her real name was Catherine. And she married Jimmy Kinsella, and they had 4 children. Mary Alice, Margie, Catherine, they call her Kay now, and Jimmy. They're all living except Margie. And, but Nellie never married, and she took care of my grandmother when she was so sick. And George was married to Estelle. She was lovely. And he had a grocery store, and he retired too soon. And then when he tried to reopen, the customers didn't come back to him. They had by that time shifted their allegiance to either another neighborhood store or to the gross Kroger's and those stores, chain stores that were. So he was in financial straits, poor financial straits at the end, and I had to help him out many a time. And he was a very self-centered man, very handsome man, Uncle George, very self-centered. And one time I went over and spent my whole lunch hour at the store across from the Fanning School. The weather was real bad, and I sent him all kinds of things to keep him from having to go out to the store in the bad weather. And then I called the cab, had to pay a cab, like $15 to deliver it. And then I called that evening because I didn't hear from him. And I said, Uncle George, did you get all the groceries I sent to you? He said, yes, Aunt Catherine, but he said, the next time you get peanut butter, don't get I forget what type it was, Get Peter Pan peanut butter. And that's all he had to say. All the cookies and the sausage and the fruits and everything that I had sent him. The cereal, the milk, the coffee, everything. I'd sent him about $85 worth of groceries, and in those days it was a lot. So, with the, it was, but, those were our relatives, and now, as I say, I hear from Mary Alice. Margie's deceased. Jimmy divorced his wife and is married again. And I don't hear from Kay. She was much younger. She loves to play golf. She goes out to, goes south, let me see, where is that? She goes every year for about 6 months, but Mary Alice told me the other day that she's only going to go for 2 months because her husband, Joe, isn't well, and they're only going to go out there the 2 worst months this winter. I think that's all I'm going to say tonight.
Okay.